To make the Kosovo problem go away, the Clinton team needed some diplomatic magic. They turned to their diplomatic magician.
Madeleine Albright asked me to go back into the region to talk to Milosevic and to get involved in the Kosovo issue. And I started what proved to be the first of 9 trips to the region.
Richard Holbrooke was the Western world's resident Milosevic expert. In 1995, he had somehow brought a fix to that other Balkans nightmare with the Dayton Peace Agreement for Bosnia. The leaders of the NATO alliance believed that their show of force had convinced Milosevic to come to the peace table. This time, trying to forestall disaster in Kosovo, Holbrooke again carried a big stick. He threatened military action.
His reaction was, Kosovo's an internal matter. We said, we accept the fact that Kosovo is inside the Yugoslav national boundary, but that does not give you the right to squash its people.
It seemed to work. Milosevic agreed to negotiate directly with the other side. The other side, Washington thought, was Ibrahim Rugova, a pacifist leader of the Albanian Kosovars. For nearly a decade, he'd worn the mantle of leadership in Kosovo, president of the province, elected by the people, but unsanctioned by Belgrade. Holbrooke managed to get what seemed like a breakthrough. The old adversaries, Milosevic and Rugova, now met for the first time. As a result of the meeting, both sides got something. Milosevic won a reprieve from some of the economic sanctions imposed since the Bosnia War. Rugova received his reward, a sign that he was Washington's man in Kosovo. A personal visit with President Clinton.
This was symbolizing that meeting. It was a chance for me to meet the president. He was, of course, very preoccupied with what was happening over there. Then he promised a bigger engagement, and secondly, he promised he personally will put more effort to find the solution to the crisis.
But this hopeful interlude soon proved emblematic of the maddening frustrations of trying to solve the Balkan puzzle. While Clinton was bonding with Rugova in Washington, on the ground back in Kosovo, events were making Rugova and his pacifism irrelevant. The Kosovo Liberation Army, the KLA, was conducting its own form of diplomacy, with guns and bombs, asserting itself as the real force that counted in the Kosovo equation. For their part, the Serbian generals justified the retaliation.
Terrorist attacks on the Serbs and the police became a daily occurrence. There came a moment when all the lines of communication in the area, all the roads were blocked, especially around the local army headquarters near the Albanian border.
It was simply a necessity to free and democratize Kosovo. And nothing happened accidentally, neither the organization nor the beginning of the armed struggle.
It wasn't accidental. For the KLA, war was all calculation. They wanted what other breakaway republics had gained through bloodshed: full-blown independence, not negotiated autonomy.
The failure to deal with Kosovo and Dayton led the Albanians to conclude that the one way in which you get Western attention, in which you get a Dayton-like conference, in which you get the President of the United States to pay attention to you, is to use violence. That violence begets international attention, and that therefore one should start violence, a policy that the Kosovars had been pursuing since 1989 of nonviolent opposition all of a sudden became less and less viable. And as time goes by, more and more people realize or come to the conclusion that the way you get the West involved is to start killing people.
For his part, Milosevic fought back, Balkan style. The Serbs drove the villagers into the hills and into the arms of the KLA.
I was pretty upfront about saying that if we stayed out of it, the Serbs took that to mean that they could just continue to do what they're doing, and the Albanians just continued to argue that they needed independence, full stop. And so with those sort of ingredients in the mix, we weren't going to get anywhere. We were going to end up with a full-blown war.
The U.S. had told Milosevic that war in Kosovo would bring American military action. Now Milosevic and the KLA waited. Would the Americans live up to their threat? The answer was no. The Clinton administration had decided it could never sell a fight against Milosevic alone. It had to be part of a European coalition, NATO.
We believed that it needed to be a NATO commitment, not just an American commitment, because whether we could sustain unilaterally action against Milosevic, I think, was, under these circumstances, an open question.
Over at the Pentagon, the civilian leaders agreed.
I was absolutely convinced that the United States could not afford to take any kind of unilateral action from a political or a point of view, and certainly we were not going to recommend that to the President and to the Congress, that we intervene unilaterally without NATO consensus and support.
NATO was a relic of the Cold War, a U.S. alliance with Europe constructed to defend against the Soviets, an organization that was reinventing itself. It had never been to war, but now it asked its top general to start planning for one.
Ministers were grasping for what could be done to prevent an outbreak of destabilization of the region, and so they turned to NATO. Again, NATO demonstrated its effectiveness in Bosnia, and naturally the first NATO means they sought to use was the means that had proved itself to be effective before, NATO air. And that's why we began with the air planning effort.
We are here to insist on full compliance with Dayton.
Wes Clark was no stranger to Belgrade. He had been Dick Holbrook's military aide at Dayton, another American who believed he knew how to handle Milosevic.
As far as Milosevic is concerned, I'm probably unique among 20th century commanders in knowing so well the adversarial leadership, the people on the other side. I don't think anybody's had quite the same experience that I've had in terms of knowing your enemy. And so I had a pretty good feel for what he might do and how he might do it.
The most the coalition decided to do was send a message to Milosevic. Maybe even back him down with a little saber rattling. "85 planes were sent to buzz the Kosovo border, and the politicians talk even tougher."
This is his last warning. If he continues to cross the line, he should not be surprised by the option that is adopted by the international community to respond next time.
But in Belgrade, Milosevic's generals weren't fazed by what became known as NATO's Balkan Air Show.
As far as NATO's threats were concerned, we didn't have any valid reason to believe them. They had no reason to protect the terrorists. They had no reason to get involved in the internal politics of another country. Because of these reasons, we couldn't believe them.